Welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
My name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 12, where we're talking about the 2016 Kennerspiel Jahres nominee, Raiders of the North Sea, along with the expansions, the Hall of Heroes and the Fields of Fame. And we're also going to be talking about the new solo variant, the official solo variant, that's just been released for this game, that's been highly anticipated from Garfield Games. But first, let's talk about the news. This week we have just a few pretty important news updates for you. The first is that on Board Game Geek, you can find a preview for the new game Spring Meadow from Uwe Rosenberg. So this is a very highly anticipated polyomino laying game. We mentioned it a few episodes back, and since we mentioned it, nobody seems to be talking about it. It's out there and people are interested in it, but there's been no new information. And suddenly, Eric Martin on Board Game Geek has published a pretty thorough overview. So if you're interested in that and what it's going to be like, go ahead and head over there and you'll get a feel for how the game plays. The second thing we want to mention this week is that Tony Boydell's famous Euro game Snowdonia, which is about building train tracks that lead up the Snowdonia mountain. I'm not 100% sure exactly what the mountain is, but you're building a train track up a mountain. And this is a game that has been lauded for many years as a great solo experience. And it is now getting a new edition on Kickstarter. It's getting a nice, big, deluxe edition. And what's crazy about this is that they are packaging every expansion that has ever been made for this. And not just every expansion, but every promo card and even print and play cards that people have put online, fan-made cards. They're officially printing them and putting them in this box. They're upgrading all the components. I mean, it is a stellar-looking production. I've actually backed this one myself and really looking forward to seeing that come in. This is up on Kickstarter still at the time of this recording, and probably at the time that this posts, for about $80, which, when you consider everything that's in the box, is a pretty great deal. And this is a Kickstarter limited item, which I think just means it'll mostly be available through this Kickstarter. So if you're interested, you want to jump on that quick. This game's been out of print for a good long while now, and people have wanted to get their hands on it. If you're one of them, check out the Kickstarter.
How many expansions is that?
It feels like an Agricola number of expansions.
Okay.
When you look at the website, they're mostly card decks, but they seem to add all kinds of crazy things, like a train line that carries coffins, different scenarios that involve like a military siege while they're building train tracks. I mean, it's pretty wild, all the different things that it adds to the game.
Yeah, that sounds crazy.
Yeah, it looks great, and if you look online, you can find some good playthrough videos. Rado's done a good playthrough for this game, and it just looks so smooth and elegant, and it's not hard to see why it's had this much love for this long. So we'll review that whenever it comes out, and I think it's supposed to arrive sometime like June 2019, so it's going to be a good long while, but looking forward to that one. Our final piece of news this week is that CMON has its new Kickstarter up for a game by Rob Davio and Eric Lang, which is a powerhouse duo if there ever has been one, for a game called Death May Die, or I guess the full title is Cthulhu, Death May Die. This is an interesting sort of game from CMON in the sense that it puts you as investigators against Cthulhu, which has been done about 1 million times. Except that it's more fighty, maybe, than some of the others. Like in Eldritch Horror and Mansions of Madness, you're trying to stop the gods from coming into the world. In this one, I think they're already here or else almost here. And so it's more combat action movie kind of oriented. You start the game crazy.
Awesome.
Which is a fantastic move. And Eric Lang has said the game has just been designed to take the fight to Cthulhu. So if you've ever wanted to beat up on the big guy, you can. Now, I mention this here because, not only because it's going to make a ton of money, because it's a CMON game. At this point, it's been up for just a few days, and it's made $1.5 million, I think.
Of course.
But also, there are a couple of interesting things about this campaign. Number one, the core box is $99 or $100 for the core box. And it comes with a series of chapters that you play through to get the story of Cthulhu and how he may die. And then they've got a $260 version that includes the Relia Rising expansion. Okay, and that expansion is a miniature, if you can even call it that anymore, of Cthulhu rising from his watery underground world. And this miniature, they showed a child next to it for scale, and is taller than a toddler. It's like 2.5 feet tall.
Oh my gosh.
It's insane. And what's really insane is that the price is not bad on it when you consider, I mean, it's $100 and something.
Right.
But considering the size of it, it's not bad. And also, it's an actual playable piece. So there's a final chapter that comes with it where Cthulhu rises from the sea. You use this piece. It comes with cards and everything that it's part of the game. I suppose you just set it on top of the table. This is one of the most ridiculous components that's ever been in a Kickstarter ever. I'm not backing this, but there's a really evil, dark part of me that wants to, just because this thing looks so cool. Now, that said, there's been a lot of controversy around the Kickstarter. The whole campaign so far has been kind of a dumpster fire, because when it first started, the tier that allows you to get that mega expansion was like $230. And they would allow 100 people to back it at that price, which happened instantly. I mean, it immediately sold out. And then they added another tier where another 100 people could back it, and they raised the price $5. And then when that sold out, they raised the price $5 more. And so within the space of like 10, 15 minutes, the price of that tier had been raised something like $30, $40, which is interesting because it's pretty obvious to me that you don't need to build in a sense of, I need to get this right now.
Right.
It feels like a pretty jerk move to just jack up the price $5 every few minutes just because you're not hitting refresh at the right time on your page. And that's what was happening to people. People were sitting there desperately trying to refresh the page so they could get one of these statues and get it cheaper. And they were finding the price just being driven up every time they were refreshing. I have no idea why they thought this was a good idea, but it just feels like a knife in the back for a Kickstarter base that has been very loyal to this company.
Yeah, that's just a bizarre choice. Is the price stable now, though, I take it?
Yeah, the price is stable only because it's all sold out.
Oh,
at
right,
this point.
Of course.
So they're completely done selling this statue, and if you couldn't get your hands on it, too bad, I guess. But it just feels like, why didn't you just say, we have 500 of these to sell right from the beginning, pick one price, and put it up there? I don't know. It just feels disloyal to the customer base that has stuck with them for many years as their prices have just gotten higher and higher. And so I also think the delivery time on this is sometime in 2020. I mean, it's pretty far out there for a Kickstarter.
It's strange that they would also limit that. Like, that just seems really artificial.
It does. If you're already working with a timeline that's that long, why not just say, we'll sell as many as we can? You know, because it's clear that people want it, unless they're actively, losing money on this thing.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
That might be the case, just to build some excitement at the beginning. It just struck me and many others, based on the comments that were all over the CMON posts, as a pretty underhanded sort of move. So just thought we would mention it here. It is a soloable game, and if you want to get in on that madness, you certainly can. It'll be on Kickstarter when this posts. And that's all we've got for the news this week. Now we're going to move on, like we always do, to our review. And this week we're reviewing Raiders of the North Sea, which is from designer Shim Phillips and Garphill Games, and ultimately at Renegade Games republished it here in the United States, I think. It plays 1 to 5 players as long as you're playing with either of the 2 expansions, the Fields of Fame or the Hall of Heroes, both of which we'll be talking about in this review. And in order to play it solo officially, you need to buy this separate deck of cards called the Raiders of the North Sea solo variant. It costs $10 to $15, at least here in the US, and it gives you an AI player to play against. And this game has gotten a lot of buzz since it came out, not only because it is a Viking Euro worker placement game, but also because it was the 2016 Kennerspiel des Jahres nominee, where it was nominated alongside games like Isle of Skye and Terraforming Mars. And it didn't end up winning that year. Actually, Isle of Skye ended up winning. But anytime a game is nominated for the Kennerspiel des Jahres, it gets lots of extra attention. So we're going to be taking a look at this because a lot of you have been interested in it. A lot of people have been excited about this solo variant expansion coming out. And because of the low price point, it's very easy to transform your copy of Raiders into a solo experience. So we'll start the review like we always do by talking about the components. What do you think about the components for this game?
The components are really good. The nice wooden pieces, well, I guess for most things. The provision pieces, unless you get the collector's box, are cardboard, which stands out since everything else is wooden. I mean, they're fine as cardboard pieces, though, but it just...
Yeah, they are, but it just strikes you as a little bit odd, given that all the other pieces are not only like wooden bits, but they're not cubes. They're actually shaped like little, iron pieces or gold or whatever. They look really nice.
Right.
And then here's your one set of cardboard resource tokens. It's a little odd.
Right. The coins are awesome.
Yeah.
Love the coins.
This is the only retail copy of a game that I've ever seen. I mean, I picked this up in a Hobbytown USA, so it's not a Kickstarter edition or anything like that. It comes with metal coins in the base box. That's insane.
Oh, they're great. They're great metal coins, too.
Oh, yeah. They're stamped with this really cool style that makes them look like they definitely came from the North Sea somewhere.
Right.
I mean, it looks fantastic. And I would say, too, that most of the artwork in this game is really good also.
Especially the cards.
Oh, yeah. The card artwork is phenomenal. Not only because it's like bright and colorful and vivid, but also just has a style that's unlike anything else I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know of a way to describe it, but it clearly stands out.
Right.
The only things that we would say, I think, about the production of the game that we're a little bit iffy on, the board is interesting. It looks really good. It's bright and colorful on the table, but it does have a very clearly different art style than the cards. It has sort of an airbrushed, sort of dreamy quality to it.
Right.
That looks good and looks clear and easy to check out, but it does look a little bit strange next to the card art.
Yeah, it doesn't quite match.
It doesn't. And again, not a big deal, but
Right.
You can just see there's some pretty major differences there in the style. But the bigger issue for me with the board is when you set up this game, you're supposed to put certain color workers, because this is a worker placement game, on the board at the beginning of the game. And the game board tells you, okay, put a black worker in this space, a gray worker here, a white worker here. Those are the three colors. And the spots where you need to put a gray worker are not clear to me really at all. There are some spots on the top half of the board that look more like a normal gray, but the ones on the bottom half, like near the harbor section of the board, I thought they were black at the beginning.
Right. The very first time I set it up, I put black workers there because they looked different enough from the gray ones at the top of the board.
Yeah, but they're both supposed to be gray, but they look pretty wildly different.
Yeah.
And there was also an issue with one of the wooden tokens that tracks player points, the purple player.
Yeah.
All of his tokens are the same color purple in my copy, except for one, which is like a weirdly different color purple.
Yeah, a significantly different shade of purple.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, but it just is kind of an odd production flaw. It's possible that it's just in our copy of the game.
That's true. There's only one.
Yeah, so it's not a big deal, but just the colors on the board are annoying, and if you have color blindness issues especially, I bet it would probably be a little bit difficult for you. The other issue that I have with this game is that the box that it comes in, the base game of Raiders, I always throw away expansion boxes. I don't want them cluttering up my shelves, and I really want base games to come with a box big enough to hold expansions. And you can tell pretty clearly from some of the things that we'll talk about later on that they had the expansions in mind when they designed the base game. And yet, the base game box cannot hold expansions. It just can't. So, I really, really dislike that. If you want a box that's going to be able to hold the base game and both of the expansions and the solo deck, you need to buy a separate collector's box. And right now, in order to get that in the United States at least, I had to pay, I think it was $20 plus shipping or something. I think total I paid $28 for this thing. It's a box that does come with a nice insert that holds everything really well. actually. And it does come with wooden tokens to replace those cardboard ones for the provisions. But that doesn't feel like $28 worth of stuff. And also, even though the insert is nice, I don't care about it that much. I would prefer to just have the normal size box from the beginning.
Right.
And let me put things in baggies or whatever.
Yeah.
Pretty minor gripe in the grand scheme of things, but the box size issue and the colors of the things on the board, they're definitely something to consider. Especially if you're a space conscious kind of gamer, which a lot of people who listen to the show, I expect, are. So that's all we've got for the components, though. Overall, I would say very high quality components. And the rules are also really well done as well. It's a quick game to learn. It's very simple. The rules are laid out in a clear way. And I don't love having to use 3 separate rule books whenever I play a game, but it's fine.
Right. It's not bad. The rules, I feel like, are simple enough and intuitive enough that you don't have to like constantly be looking up things to double check, edge cases.
Right, exactly. I never really found myself looking back through the rule book for anything. And when we played this game with the expansions for the first time, we actually busted out both of the expansions at game night, read through the rules sitting at the table, and played a game, and I didn't feel like we had that many issues.
Oh, yeah.
So it's pretty easy to pick up and play, and so that is wonderful. And the solo rule set that comes with the solo variant expansion is just outstanding.
Yeah, it's really, really, really cool how they managed to do it.
Yeah, because when you get this solo expansion, it's just a little tuck box that holds all the AI cards. But when you unfold this tuck box, it folds out flat, and you can read the rules right there on the inside of the tuck box, which is just brilliant.
Right, it's great. I mean, yeah, and the tuck box is like this kind of nice laminated cardstock that just looks good. I mean, it seems durable and...
Yeah, not only does it feel good and it packs away nice, but also it just adds almost nothing in terms of new stuff to learn in order to play this solo.
Right.
It's very minimal, and the way they managed to design the deck of cards feels intuitive and easy to manage. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the rules, I think, are very well done. And then we actually get to the play of the game here. And I think maybe it'd be helpful to talk about the base game first, or what comes in the base game, and we'll talk about elements of the expansions along the way. I should say the base game with the solo variant, because that's what we're focusing on here with this show.
Right.
The core element of this game is it's a worker placement game where you're trying to gather resources to make offerings to the village elder, and you're trying to complete quests, and you're trying to defeat local Jarls and destroy Valkyries that are out on the board and destroy them in combat. And you're trying to use your crew to raid the North Sea. I mean, that's the whole thing of the game. And the way that works in this game is that the bottom half of the board is sort of a normal, simple worker placement setup where you place workers down, you get resources, and that's it. I mean, it's a resource collection point for the most part. The top half of the board, though, you can send workers there to actually raid these towns and villages and get more resources and victory points at the top. And so you don't actually own any workers, which is a pretty neat concept. You just have a worker to start the game. You place it down on your turn. You do the action of whatever spot where you placed it, and then you pick up another worker. And you do the action of that spot as well. So it does give you the ability to kind of combo a couple of things nicely. And having 2 actions on your turn instead of just 1 and taking whatever spot you put it on feels good.
Right.
And then the other wrinkle in this is that there are 3 different colors of workers, and some spots on the board require one of those specific colors in order to complete the action. Or maybe you need a gray or white worker, which are the two best ones to do this action in the village that's a little better than the others, that will actually net you victory points or something like that. And so there's a timing issue to when you place and pick up workers that I found was really nice.
Yeah, it was really nice, I guess, just trying to manage and like prioritize, okay, well, I have one of these higher powered workers. Do I want to use it for a space down in the village, or do I want to use it to raid one of the higher level areas?
Exactly. And not only that, but when you put out a worker on the board, you're not for sure that you're going to be able to pick it up the next turn because, like, let's say I put down a white worker to take a spot that I really want, and then next turn I really want to use it to go on a raid. I'm not guaranteed that I'm going to be able to do that because when the AI player takes their turn, either they're going to raid a spot up north, and they might take one of the spots where you wanted to go. If they don't raid, they'll gather provisions in the village, and they're always going to block one space in the village. And so you're not guaranteed to be able to get that worker back. So there's some tension there, and like, do I really want to use this in the village right now? You know, because you might be messing yourself over for a couple of turns when you really needed to be doing something else. So that does feel really good there. But there are some issues that we have with how the lower half of the board actually works. Because when you're down in the village working, you're just basically gathering supplies, or you're adding new crew cards to your crew. You start the game with a handful of 5 cards, and if you pay money, you can hire these people into your crew that give you special abilities. The cards are great. That part's really fun. You can pay to hire them in your crew and get bonuses when you go on raids usually. Or some of them, I guess, give you bonuses when you work in the village.
Right.
And that feels really great. Or you can go to another spot and just play them without hiring them for like a one-time bonus. That way that works is really neat. I like that. But the normal just going to a spot, getting some provisions or getting some coins, it just feels kind of boring.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's just, it feels like something that we've moved past.
I guess I'm okay with those types of just kind of gathering the base level resources or just, I guess, really simplistic worker spots. As long as later on I'm not having to deal with them and I get to use more advanced spots that do more interesting things or something along that nature, or I'm just building an engine of sorts where I don't have to worry about these more boring actions.
It's really not bad. I say we've moved on from it. I don't mean from like gathering resources as a whole, because that's pretty key to a lot of Euro games, and I don't mind that. But there's no engine building element to this. Like, you never earn an income at the beginning of the round. None of this becomes automated for you. There are cards that you can get over time that will help you to collect things more efficiently in the village, and that is great, you know, and that's a little bit of an engine building element, I suppose. But things never feel like they pick up steam in terms of gathering resources. So the economy for that is always tight and not in a way that feels great to me.
It wasn't very often that I was placing workers in the village and I felt like I pulled off a really kind of elaborate or sophisticated move. A lot of times it was just like, well, I need more provisions, so I'll do these actions, or I need to do this. And it was definitely like slowing down the pace of the turn or the actions I was doing, as opposed to raiding almost always feels good and was very exciting. And so it was taking raiding actions and doing associated things with fighting Jarls or Valkyries or whatever. And then I would just have to kind of put that on pause and then just go gather more resources so I could do it again. And that gathering resources never really felt different from like the beginning of the game versus the end.
That's it. The fact that it doesn't feel different over time is the bigger deal, I think. And it just feels like an intermission from the more interesting part of the game.
Right.
You know, I'll grind through this part, and it does feel like a grind most of the time in order to go on a raid, because you need provisions and sometimes gold to actually go on a raid. And there's no really easy way to get those. And that's okay. Things don't necessarily need to be easy to get in a Euro game. But what I don't like about this is, to get enough provisions to even go on a simple raid, I need to go and take this action to get provisions with my worker. And then I still don't have enough to actually go and do the thing I want to do. I still have to take another turn next round to gather more, and I still may not have enough to do the thing I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 'cause at the beginning of the game especially, you often will need, 2 or 3 provisions to go on a raid. And that means as long as you have the black workers, you're only gathering 1 provision at a time. So that's like 3 rounds of gathering stuff, unless you have a card that helps you. I don't like that.
Right. And also, if the spot that gives you provisions, or one of the spots that allows you to get provisions, is blocked for whatever reason, that just delays it 1 more turn.
Yes. That is one thing that does change in the solo game versus the multiplayer game. In a multiplayer game, you can always pick up or place on a spot, because you're never blocking other players on their turn. But in a solo game, one of those spots is blocked every round. And so I do like that tension, except that sometimes, because it's paired with this non-engine building kind of system, It just feels like, okay, well, all my best played plans are just delayed for one more turn.
Right.
That is not enough for us to dislike the game by any means, but it just feels like I wish there was something that you could do to give you more of a sense of momentum or growth over the course of the game. And it doesn't really feel like that to me. Like you said, it feels mostly the same at the end as the beginning. But the more interesting thing that you can do on your turn instead of working in the village is once you've got all the supplies and everything you need, you can go on a raid. And raids are a little bit different than working in the village because you're not going to place and pick up and do 2 actions on the same turn. Instead, you're going to place your worker on one of the raid spots. You're going to pay whatever provisions or resources you need to spend. And then you're going to pick up whatever resources are in that little raid spot and get victory points for doing it, which is pretty cool. I mean, that feels great. Collecting a pile of 4 resources is cool. Being able to do that at the sites at the top of the board, which are harder to raid and more valuable, feels really good. Not only because you're collecting resources and getting points, but also because some of those spots have die symbols next to them. So you're going to look at your military strength that you have in your crew and in the armor that you built yourself, which is one of the things you can do in the village. And you'll combine that with a die roll. And then there's sort of these tiers, like if you have so much military strength, you get this many victory points. But if you have a little bit more, you'll get more victory points. I love that tension because if it was purely deterministic and just me deciding, okay, I've got the military strength I need now to get these points, that would be fine and a little less lucky. But it doesn't have the drama of rolling a die. I love the decision on your part, like, do I want to race the AI up to this raid spot and get this stuff while I know I can, and just hope that the dice break my way so that I can get as many points as possible? Or do I want to make sure that I have what I need and then go up there? That's a really great sort of push your luck type of decision that it feels good.
Yeah, it's all very satisfying getting to roll the die, like figure out just not knowing for sure how much you're going to get and possibly just getting a lot or not, whether that makes you successful or not.
And there's a lot of other crunchy choices that go into those raids too. I mean, not only is it the choice of when to go because of the military stuff, you also have to consider that when you put a worker down on one of these raid spots, it's gone for the rest of the game. So if you get a white or a gray worker relatively early in the game, you can use that in the village to go to spots that you might not be able to go to otherwise, and that's really beneficial. Or you can spend it to go on the raid, but then it's just gone. That's very cool. I like that a lot. And that's one of the triggers for the end of the game, too, is if there's only one spot left at the top of the board that hasn't been raided, then the game's over. And so there's sort of a timing element there, too. Like, okay, how fast do I want this thing to end? Makes you pay attention to the AI player and their progress, because if you just rush to the end, you may not have quite enough to beat them. You may need to drag the game out a little longer. I really like that piece of it.
Yeah, I like that there's also multiple ways that the game, I guess, conditions for ending the game. Just kind of balancing those of how, like, when the game is going to end, what the likelihood of the game ending could possibly be with, either the Valkyries, like, getting all scooped up or all of the, like, top spots to raid, all but one get used. And so it's just another kind of almost like pushing your luck sometimes, too, of, like, trying to delay things or try to get just more points, or ending it while you have a lead.
Yeah, that all feels really good. And there's the added tension on top of that, even of like, okay, I need these resources in order to go back to the village and present a gift to the elders, right? Which are these little tiles that are one of the in-game triggers too, that are just basic set collection type tiles. If I turn in 2 livestock and 2 gold, I can get 5 points at the end of the game. It's not exciting, but it is a way that you can net more points.
Right.
Which is cool. But the other piece of this is, like, sometimes there will be spots that have exactly the resources you need, but they also have Valkyries in them, which are these little black tokens that represent these, powerful mythical military force. And if you go to one of these spots and you pick up a Valkyrie token along with your other resources, it automatically kills one of your crew members. And that is a really tricky decision about timing-wise. When do you want to pick up a Valkyrie? Because, losing one of your crew members in this game is a pretty big deal, because it took you like 3-4 different moves to even get that crew member into your hand and down into your crew. You invest time and resources into these folks, and you need their strength in order to be successful on the big raids. But them dying on the raids is not always a bad thing. I mean, it's bad in the sense that you lose some of your crew, but there's a track that you'll progress on every time one of your crew members dies to a Valkyrie. And at the beginning, you might get 1 point for a crew member that's died to a Valkyrie. But if you go all the way up to the top of the track, you're getting 15 points at the end of the game, which is significant.
Yes. And also, there's several of your crew members that their special ability is if they die on certain types of, I guess, raiding spots, they give you extra victory points.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And so you can actually get more points for dying in that way.
Right.
Which is very cool. Or sometimes they'll give you a gold or something like that.
Right.
That's really neat. And you don't want to die too early on to the Valkyries because you need to build up a crew a little bit. But also you kind of do need to die quickly and to take those Valkyrie spots, because if you allow the AI player to come in and scoop up those spots with all the Valkyries, when that happens, when he takes a Valkyrie, he just shoots up the track because you're not tracking his crew or anything like that. It's a very simple, easy to manage system, and you can't afford for him to be getting all those Valkyries.
Right.
So that's a great little push and pull there. The downside to it, though, is that it just adds to that feeling of, okay, I go on a raid and I do this cool thing, and now I've got to take time to build back up to do it again, because you've got to build up your crew too, in addition to your resources.
Right.
It's definitely a game of accelerating really quickly and doing a cool thing and then having to pull back. It's like a start and stop kind of feel. That's just the base game, though. The base game is good. It's really solid and innovative, I would say.
Yeah.
Worker placement game, in that you don't have your own workers, and the pick up and place thing, that balance is great. Rating feels very different.
Yes.
I mean, there's lots of really cool stuff there, but this game really shines with the expansions. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those so you can get a feel for, you know, whether you'd like to add one or both to your game. The first one I think we probably should mention is the Hall of Heroes expansion. And that one adds a couple of different things to the game. It adds this board down at the bottom that has a mead hall, and it adds a new resource to the game, which is mead. Also,
just to mention quickly, the board that adds to the bottom lines up with the art at the bottom of the main board, which is a nice touch.
Oh, yeah, it's a very nice touch. It all looks like it was meant to be there.
Right.
And the nice thing about the mead hall is that there are always 3 different crew cards out that you can sort of go in and charm these people into joining your hand, essentially. You don't get to add them immediately to your crew, but you can pick them up and put them in your hand. And what's nice about this is you're not just totally dependent on the luck of the drawing cards. The other spot in the village where you could get crew before, you just had to draw the top cards off the deck. This is really nice, being able to see what you're getting. And putting those cards into your hand feels good. And then depending on which spot you pick up the card on, you might also get some money and you'll get some mead. And mead is so good because it adds a little bit more fun to your raids. As when you go on a raid now, you can spend mead before you roll the dice to see how much extra strength you get. And for every mead that you add to the fight, or that you spend for this raid, you get 1 extra strength for that fight. Mead makes you strong.
Right.
Which it does in real life.
Yes.
And that's why it's in Beowulf.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just a funny, cool, thematic addition to the game, and it also adds more push your luck to the fights. Like, I'll probably roll what I need to on this die just to get what I need points wise, but just to lock it in, I'll go ahead and spend this mead. And it doesn't feel like as precious a commodity as the other things too, to me. And so it doesn't feel bad to spend it. So it's cool. I think you'll find yourself going there a lot. But the more interesting thing that this expansion adds is that when you go to the mead hall, instead of getting a crew member and getting mead, you can instead complete a quest. And this changes the game pretty dramatically, I would say.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
So normally, when you raid a spot on the board and you take the resources from it, it's just empty. But the spot that the resources are in are the shape of these quest tiles that come with this expansion. So it's very clear that they had this in mind from the beginning. Whenever you clear one of those spots, you put a quest tile out, and the way these work is you can play cards from your hand and spin them from your hand without hiring them in order to complete a quest. When that happens, you take this tile, you put it at the top of your new player board, and it'll get you points at the end of the game. Just like the Valkyrie track or whatever, the more of them you get, more points it'll net you. But it also gets you resources. And this is, for me, what makes this a great expansion, because Before, you were entirely dependent on the raids to get the gold and livestock you needed to make offerings to the elders or, increase your armor or whatever. Being able to have another avenue to do that is huge.
Yeah.
The other great part about this is that for the AI player, the only thing this changes for them is that at the end of the game, they will get 1 point for each quest that's left on the board. And pretty quickly, you'll see you'll start raiding, he'll start raiding, and those spots will get cleared and quests will go out. And you start counting and doing the math and you realize, if I don't pay attention to quests, he's going to stomp me. And so that's a great new little push and pull that I really like. If you don't pay attention to quests, at least to some degree, you're going to get hurt. And so that's pretty neat and integrates very easily. The game literally has one side of one little player card that adds the rules you need to include this expansion in the game.
Yeah, it's very straightforward to add and just works really well.
This is brilliant solo design, in my opinion. Just the ability to add this in so simply is great. And the Fields of Fame expansion is, I think, Carter's favorite of the two.
Yeah, I like it a little bit more. I mean, the other one's good, but...
Yeah, Hall of Heroes is my favorite, but just by a little bit. But Fields of Fame is also very cool. It adds these new tokens that you put out to the raid spots that are Jarl tokens. And like the Valkyrie tokens, if you encounter one of these spots and you pick up one of these, it's like good and bad for you.
Yeah, right. So you would, if you're going to fight a Jarl, you will draw a Jarl card from the deck, and you have 3 options. You can kill the Jarl and get fame for it, which is nice. Just another point track that you can get. You can subdue the Jarl and then add them to your crew, which is awesome because they're super powerful. Well, they're just very powerful.
Well, they're all strength 5 or 6, and I think the other deck tops out at 4, and they have other victory point conditions on them too.
Yeah, typically like in-game. And then the other option is just flee like a cow. And each choice will have a certain amount of wounds that you receive that you have to put on your crew members. 1 wound just reduces a crew member's strength by 1. And so the amount of wounds they can take is limited by their strength. So just how well you can kind of compensate for wounds and take them on is really neat. And then just kind of combining that with dumping a bunch of wounds on like 1 crew member and then just letting the Valkyrie kill them. And just like kind of making smart plays and just getting a bunch of points and like getting an awesome crew. It all works really well.
Yeah, when I first read the rules for this, I thought it's just going to make it feel even worse with like taking damage on your crew, and then your crew doesn't have the strength that it needs to actually do stuff. And that's not entirely true, because if you encounter Jarls and Valkyries in the same raid, you encounter the Jarls first and then the Valkyrie. And even if your crew takes the maximum number of wounds it can, it doesn't just die and go out of your crew. It's still there. It's just limping along. So you can intentionally wound your crew and then feed them to the Valkyries, basically.
Right, just grind them up.
Which is great, because it makes that little element of losing your crew feel more satisfying and more kind of combo-y, I think.
Yeah.
I really like that element of it. It makes going up on the Valkyrie track feel more satisfying, and getting 2 fame for killing a Jarl doesn't sound like much, and it's not in the beginning, but by the end, when you're progressing to the top of that track, it's again worth 15 points at the end of the game.
Right.
So that's a big deal. And that little sideboard, which again matches up brilliantly with the main board.
Right.
It also adds a couple more spots for you to raid, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
More beginning of the game kind of spots, which is really helpful. And the other cool thing that this adds, and I really like this, is if you raid a spot on the board that has a die and has like one of those military strength kind of tests for victory points, if you exceed the top tier of strength by 4 points or more, then you can go up on the fame track too. It just feels great. It's sort of like an overkill mechanic.
Yeah, and it's also nice it makes you question what spot you're going to raid, because you will probably definitely overkill on some of the weaker spots if they're available and you have a ton of strength. Or you could raid, the harder spots and you won't get those extra fame points, but you're getting extra resources. So, that was a choice I made at least once in one of my games, of taking a lower tier raiding spot just because I would get extra fame.
I did the same thing, and I really like that you can do that. And the AI player here, again, integrates very easily. The only thing that changes for them is that when they scoop up a raid spot that has a Jarl token, they just automatically go up on the fame track. That's it. And it again fits on the back of a player card. I mean, the way this AI system is handled is just great. And the fact that you can use these expansions in sort of a modular way is really nice. So no matter how much Raiders you own currently, just buy this expansion. I mean, really, it is going to grow with you if you decide to get more of the content for the game.
Yeah.
So that's looking at sort of each piece of this game. I want to talk for just a minute about the AI player and how it works and how you manage it, because we didn't really say specifically. But all you have to do is after you take your turn, which you would take just like a multiplayer game, you draw a card from the AI deck, and it'll either have you raid or collect resources, and it'll block a spot. It's very quick. It becomes like muscle memory sort of movement in between turns. That makes this whole game experience so much quicker playing solo than playing with other people. Really, really like how smooth that is.
Yeah, it's very fast to like just parse the information of the card. Can I raid this spot? Yes or no? Okay, I can't, so I take these resources and I block this spot, and you're done.
Right, exactly. But it does still have the same problem in the solo game that the pacing is still weird.
Yes.
And so we've played this both multiplayer and solo. I 100% like it better solo than multiplayer. And one of the reasons for that is that the cards that you can play, the crew cards, on their play mechanic, like the one time and discard it side, they have a lot of take that kind of powers. And I despise take that, not only in games in general, but like doubly so in Euro games, especially a game like this where there is no engine really and you're really fighting for every resource. I get that it's sort of supposed to encourage you not to hoard resources, but there's already a limit on how many resources you can have.
Yeah.
And it just makes your multiple turns feel wasted when somebody takes stuff from you. So I despise that in the game. And the fact that in a solo game, I don't have to worry about that, I just ignore that part of the card,
right,
is mostly good. The only thing I don't like about that is that only half the card is useful to you. I don't really like it when solo modes do that. I sort of wish that Raiders had taken a page from Terraforming Mars book in this regard, because Terraforming Mars has these same kind of take that cards that I despise in the multiplayer game. But in the solo game, you can play them. The rules say basically just pretend there's an imaginary player that you're stealing resources from. That's great. You know,
right.
It still allows you to use the card without being mean. So I really like that in that game. I wish they could have done that here. But those are the last few things that really I think were worth mentioning about how the game is structured and what it feels like to play. Overall, it feels good to play, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so. And I'm kind of with you in that the solo mode feels a little bit better. I still like the multiplayer mode, but there's no take that mechanic in it that you're really having to worry about. And it goes faster.
Yeah, it does go faster. And we'll start looking now at the things that are good and bad and ugly about the game like we always do. I'm putting this firmly in the good category. You know, the fact that it moves at a little quicker clip, and really you control the rate at which this game is ending.
Right.
The AI does to a certain degree, but you need to be pushing forward and toward those in-game mechanics to end the game when you want it to.
Right.
And that's good. So I like that changes the pacing there, and that's a good thing about the game. And I'll say, too, that I've never played a game of this solo that the scores weren't close.
Yeah.
So the AI has beaten me most of the time and is a good challenge.
Yes.
And even if you did get to a point where you're beating him, that has multiple difficulty modes in the box. So this is what I'm going to say here. It is rare for me to say I would rather play a multiplayer or solo game solo. In this case, I would 100% rather play it solo because they just knocked the solo variant out of the park here.
Yeah, they did a really good job with the solo mode. I would still enjoy it multiplayer. It's not like it's that big of a discrepancy, I guess, in my mind, but it smooths over some of the things that made me not like the multiplayer version quite as much or just enjoy it as much.
The gap for me is bigger because of how much I hate take that in games.
Right.
It's a huge amount.
I don't like take that, but it feels real bad in this game to me.
Yeah, in Euro games in general,
right.
It does, but especially here.
Right.
And that's not the only good thing, though. We really like the place and pickup mechanic. That's innovative and cool and simple.
It's a very simple change, but it makes some interesting choices, keeps you very present, and I feel like in the game as far as seeing, kind of figuring out what you're going to do, what things get closed off to you, things like that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And speaking of closed off, I would say like timing your raids and choosing to rush forward so that something is not closed off to you that you really want. That's another great element of this game, too. The timing aspect of the placing and picking up and the raids is one of the coolest things about this game. And the fact that that's mixed in, too, with the colors and needing to have certain colors to complete things is great. I would also say the card powers, even though you can't use both sides of the cards feel cool. And the game isn't asymmetric at setup, but it becomes asymmetric over time in a way that feels good to me.
Right. And it can shift with just your crew members dying from Valkyries and just kind of what are the main powers of your crew that you're exploiting to gain an advantage.
Yeah, that's nice too, because you can set up your crew to give you some nice bonuses in the village, but don't give you many, military strength points or victory points at the beginning, and then intentionally kill those people off when you're ready to switch to kind of a different strategy. It's a flexible sort of system.
Yes.
I really like that. And it's more inviting for new players, I think, because you don't have to have everything planned out ahead of time. And then also, I would just say, as far as the expansions are concerned, the number of options that you have on your turn, the number of tracks there are to go up and down, that's excellent. Yes. Really like that a lot.
It feels really good, and there's lots of interesting choice or just interesting systems kind of working together.
The final thing I would mention here under the good section is the components. I mean, it has great artwork. The pieces are really nice. It's really great here. But I'm also going to put this in the bad category a little bit in the sense that it does come at a cost. The cost is when you start doing the math for this game, when you add up the cost of the base game, both expansions, and the collector's box and the solo variant, you're talking about a $130 game here. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think it's a really, really good game. You just need to ask yourself, enough reviewers have said that the expansions are really, you need at least one, right? And I'm going to say you need the collector's box. That means then like getting in on this game is going to cost you probably $70, $80, and that's a hard pill to swallow. Games are just getting more expensive, and you do get good quality components in here. Again, metal coins and great artwork. That's just balanced with the cost of the game, I would say. And then for me, under the bad category, we're going to put the lack of a solid engine building sort of mechanic.
Right. And just kind of how that affects the pace of the game.
Yes. I don't really like that build up, spend everything, and then spend more terms building up. I don't really like that kind of movement in the game. And that's all of the things that I would say in the game that are really bad. There are two things that I would put in the ugly category. One of them is the color on the board for where the workers go. I know we mentioned that at the beginning of the game, but the more I play the game, the more it annoys me. Again, it might just be my copy of the game, but I just don't understand why those colors aren't consistent.
Yes, it's a strange difference.
Yeah, and it's just an annoyance for setup, especially in low lighting, which is how I'm usually playing. But the bigger offender here for me, as far as an ugly thing about the game is concerned, is the take that. And now, I should say here, this is only for the multiplayer side of the game. So for me, this is erased by the solo mode, but just something to consider. If you're going to play this multiplayer also, you need to consider whether you're okay with having that in the game, because it's not like a few cards.
Right.
It's, if not the majority, it's many cards, we'll say that. And it gets really annoying, especially when you feel like you're almost at the point where you can do something and then somebody smacks you around. It just makes the game go longer.
And the time that we actually played together, or like had several people playing it at once, like most of my cards, the like instant action on them was take that mechanics. And I need to use one of these cards, but it's going to be at a pretty sizable expense of someone else, and I know they're going to feel bad and probably dislike me a little bit for at least the next 15 minutes.
Oh yeah. And if you're hoping to buy this as a solo and multiplayer thing, maybe you don't care about that. A lot of people don't seem to care about that. But for us, it just didn't feel good at all.
It's not that even like our friends were like offended or like really sensitive to that, but it's just like, okay, well now they have to spend like 2 more turns doing something else to try to compensate for that.
Yes. And at that point we were already tired also, so that doesn't help things. So at the end of the day, Carter, are we going to give this the stomp of approval?
I'm going to say no, but I still really like the game a whole lot.
Yeah. And the reason we wouldn't here is reserve that for games that we absolutely love. I'm going to say for my end, I'm on the verge of loving this game as a solo experience.
Right.
And I want to say it with that caveat. I will never ask to play this multiplayer with somebody again. If somebody wants to play it multiplayer, I will, but I'm not going to bring it to game night and suggest that we play it.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I like it quite as much as you, but I still think it is a really solid and fun solo experience.
Yeah, to me, what's really great about this as a solo experience is that it has a win condition and an AI character, which is not often the case in Euro games for whatever reason. That may be becoming more popular, but usually solo variants for Euros are pretty dry. This one is not. It has some flavor, has a lot of tension. This is the kind of game that I feel like I need to reiterate. The base game is not bad at all. It's a good game. So you can get into this for, $50 and have a solo experience and have room to grow. For me personally, now that I've played with all the expansions, I can't imagine going backward.
Right.
And you do need to do the math going in saying, if you're planning on getting all the expansions, just know you're going to spend $120 or whatever. But it's fun. It's just fun. It's not too long. The setup is a little tedious, putting out all the resources and everything, but it's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad.
And the cleanup doesn't feel bad, especially if you have the collector's box. It holds everything nicely. I'm just going to play out of the box from now on.
Yeah.
The insert is that good. And I don't know, for me, this one just really works. I almost love it, and I feel like this is a game that might go up for me over time. So even though we're not giving it the stamp of approval, I really enjoy it, and I definitely recommend, if you have Raiders, check it out. If you think you might be interested in Raiders, I would still say check it out if you like solo games. This can be one that goes in your collection that you either play exclusively solo or multiplayer, and it's a good and worthy purchase. And that's all we've got for you this episode. If you haven't yet, follow us on Facebook. You can find us on there. We post pictures of what we're playing and what's going on, some updates about the show. You can also follow us on Instagram at Solosaurus Podcast. You can shoot us an email at solosaurus@gmail.com. And if you haven't yet, take just a few minutes and go to iTunes, the iTunes store, review the show, rate us, and that way we can get a little bit more exposure on iTunes and more people can find the show. Our audience is definitely growing, and it has been for the last couple of months, and we want to see that trend continue so we can do more and more with the podcast. But until next time then, my name is Brandon Waite.
My name is Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.